Hey creative friends, I have a new file I'd like to share with you for this little spring flower. This is a cardboard cutout with 4 layers, and so the files are below, an SVG and an NC cutting file. But what I would like to do in the rest of this video is take you start to finish on this entire project. And so I'm going to show you using Inkscape how I create all the shapes and then save it as an NC file, and then take it to the laser and cut it out, and then finally assemble and paint it. And so I hope you enjoy this video. One thing I will warn you about is I had done all of the Inkscape recording before I realized that my menus were not showing. There's not much that you're missing, and for the laser engraver part, I will try to include some screenshots so that you will know what those windows look like. But other than that, I hope you enjoy, and just bear with me as I'm learning new software. But I hope you enjoy this project start to finish. Thanks so much for watching. Hey creative friends. Well, today I want to show you just a little something different. I want to try to walk you through a project all the way from start to finish. And so this will be a laser design project, and I always have to start with some sort of inspiration, which I find inspiration everywhere. And so today I just want to try to do a simple cutout of cardboard for a spring flower, and just very simple little doodle here that I put in Inkscape. And then this doodle, I want it to be a layered effect with cardboard, so I want it to be 4 layers deep. And I've found that it needs to be 4 layers deep so that the item will sit up on a shelf. And so that's kind of the idea here. I want to create just a little 4-layer design of a flower pot with a very simple flower in it, and then leaves or stems coming out behind the simple flower. So that's what we're going to do. And so I do the design with just simple shapes in Inkscape, and then I will show you how we can translate that into a file, not an engraving file, but a cutting file that we can use on the NAJ laser, any diode laser, I guess, basically, or any machine that uses CNC files. So I'm just going to start with some simple shapes, and in Inkscape, I'm going to use just the square shape first, and I'm not the best at Inkscape, and so this will be quite a bit of just trial and error. And then that way you can kind of see, kind of how I like to approach this. So I'm just going to start with a simple shape. This will be kind of the bottom part of my flower pot. And it would be nice to try to angle this in a bit. And so I'm going to see if I can first maybe change this object to path. And then as we use this second tool here, we'll be able to see the nodes on those on the path. And so it's a very simple shape. It's got these 4 corners, these 4 nodes. But these nodes are awesome because you can drag them to different positions. And so I'm just going to drag that one in slightly and also drag this one in slightly. Of course, there are ways that you can make this very precise. Mine is not going to be very precise. I just want to kind of show you the rough guidelines here. I think it's either shift or control or something would have kept that vertical for me, but I just kind of played around with that until I got it the way I wanted it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make 4 copies of just this shape, because I know I want 4 layers. So 1 layer with the flower, 1 layer behind that with the leaves, and then the top and bottom layers will be this flower pot. And so I'm going to go back and select the shape, which it's done. I'm going to Control C to copy, and then Control V as in Victor to paste. I'm going to end up doing that 2 more times, and that way I know that these will be the same size. So I've got those 4 basic shapes. Next, what I want to do is just the real simple flower. So I'm going to go to this star tool, and this star tool is kind of cool because you can change how many points you want I may go ahead and just to show you, I may do it to 7. And you can have rounded instead of a pointy star, so we can play around with that. And again, lots of different settings. Honestly, there's so many things here, but we're just going to play around with this. And maybe I want that a bit more rounded, so it's still selected. I'm just going to play around with these numbers and see what happens. So let me try to set it to like 5, and oh, that's interesting. So let me go back to 0.5. Oh, that's kind of cool too. How about 0.3? Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. So I'm going to go back and make sure it's selected and then move it. We can resize this if we want. Again, down here, these tool tips that show up at the bottom of Inkscape, it'll tell us if we hold Control, it will scale uniformly. So I'm going to hold Control while I pull this out and make that a little bit larger. All right. So we can put a little bit more visual interest to our flower. I'm just going to cut out a circle in the center, and you can make it exact. It doesn't have to be exact. Sometimes sometimes I will make this a different color just so I can see my shapes, but honestly I'm going to, well, let me go ahead and do that. I will go over here to fill and just pick a different color. It really doesn't matter what it is, because what I'm going to do is end up putting this circle on top of my shape here, and then I'm going to select both items and go up to path. And I think this time I want to do the difference. Oftentimes I'll just play around with these to get whatever effect I want. If it wasn't right, just undo it and try it again. But I want to pick the difference. And so that achieved my goal, because what I want is just one shape where the circle is cut out. All right. And so I will kind of position that where I want it. And then I'm going to create just a very simple stem. Well, and honestly, what we can do is we can highlight both of these shapes. Let's see if I can get both of them here. Let's see, let me select this and then hold, I think it's Shift. Yes, so I selected this one, hold Shift, and then select the pot. That way they're both selected, and then I can come over here to alignment, align and distribute, because I want to center both of those items. And so you can hover over each of these. It will give you a little tool tip of what they are, but the little images help immensely. So I'm going to center on the vertical axis, and it moved my pot ever so slightly. All right, so now these are all lined up on the center, and I'm going to deselect and then come in, and we're going to create just a real simple rectangle. And it's green, but that's okay. So I'm going to create that rectangle and then come back and select it with the top tool. And the way these handles are shaped at this point, it would allow me to drag it and make it larger or smaller, but I want to rotate it. So if you click the shape again, notice how the handles change, and so now I can rotate it. And again, there's a way to rotate that perfectly vertical, but I'm just going to play with it until I get it the way I want it. And again, if you wanted to center all three of these pieces now, this one is selected. If I hold Shift and click the flower, and also keep holding Shift and click the pot, they're all three selected, and I'm going to center all three. They're all three still selected, so now at this point I'm going to go to Path to Union. I want to merge all three of those pieces together, and so that looks perfect. All right, so then this next layer is going to end up being leaves that will come out of this one. And so just to give myself some space, I will probably use this flower pot over here to create that. And then I don't really know the best way to do that. I want kind of leaves, you know, like this. So I'm just going to try to draw some simple shapes, and then we'll see. We'll play around with it until we get something that sort of looks like the shape we want. So again, I'm going to take my rectangle. I'm going to just create just a simple shape here. I'm going to go to path, object to path. That way I can see the nodes on it. And then I'm just going to play around with these nodes until I get something that kind of looks interesting. If you want additional nodes to be able to move this around, I believe we can just, this very first one here, insert new nodes. I believe that will work if I just click here now. Let me see what, let's see, that did not do what I wanted. So let me play around with this a bit and see if I can get some more nodes. So I'm going to go pause and figure out how to add nodes, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I did have to go out and Google that. And so whenever you have an object that is a path, you can double click anywhere on the path to add new nodes. And so I had just done this one and then started recording again to show you. I just did that one. Maybe I'll add another one here and then maybe one more just for that, just to show you. So, all right, so I have my stem shape, and then we can now click and drag on these nodes to make it a bit more interesting. And so we have the ability to kind of maybe angle this down. I'm going to add one more node here just to play around and get some interesting organic looking shapes. And then once we like this, then I will go back and select the tool and click on it so that my handles will rotate. And just to get a look of what that would look like, I'm going to rotate that around and then move it down here. And then just to try to eyeball this, again, this is going to be coming out from behind of my flower, and we'll have 4 separate layers that we can do different colors, and so that looks it looks okay to me. So I'm going to bring this back over to this shape, and my stem is selected, and so now I'm going to hold shift and select this pot, and I'm going to merge those two. So I'm going to go to path to union. All right, and then I want to do something similar to that one more time so that I have another leaf coming out this way. So I'm going to deselect. All right, and so I can start fresh here. I'm going to go back and get the rectangle tool. I'm going to click and drag to draw another rectangle. I'm going to make sure that I go to path to object to path. I'm going to click on the nodes tool. And then I'm just going to randomly add new nodes by double clicking on this path, and then we will distort it to make it look interesting. And I'm probably going to end up getting something very similar to what the other side looked like, but let me see if I can just put some other nodes on here, and we'll get this to maybe look quite a bit different. More nodes, you could have it look more flowy and rounded instead of so angular, but you get the idea. You can have as many of these nodes as you want. So let's see, that's, you know, just something to make it look organic. And of course my flower is a very precise looking flower, so these stems will not look so precise, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to select it and change it to where I can rotate it. And before we attach it, again, you can play around with the height of this, but before we attach it, I'm gonna drag it over here just to see. Yeah, I don't know, that doesn't look quite so good, does it? But let's see if we can maybe just edit this just a bit. So I'm going to play around with some of these nodes just a little bit here. And there's so much in Inkscape to learn, but you know what? You just learn best by trial and error, and just play around with it. Eventually, you'll get something you like, and then if you're like me and then you mess it up, that's okay. Just trial and error. Okay, now that one is pretty large, but let me go back to select it. You can move it up or down. Again, this is going to be a layer behind the flower. We probably don't want it too much bigger than the other one, but we do want it to stick up enough. And then the other thing to think about is this entire flower is going to be sitting on this tiny base. So we want to think about the mechanics of this too as much as we can. Again, this is just our prototype, and so we'll probably have to completely redesign it. But we do want to think about the mechanics. We don't want this way too far over to where the flower would tip over. But we'll just try this and see something about like that and see how that's going to work. So, all right. So now that I have got it the way I want, then I'm going to come over here to the pot that it's on. And I'm going to make sure that is selected, hold shift and select the rest of the pot and make sure that's just those two things. Then come up to path to union. All right. And then of course to test that full effect, we can move this over too. Now again, whenever we cut this out in our cardboard, these will be two different layers, one on top of the other, and we will paint them two different colors as well. All right, so now my front and back flower pot. What I would like to do is just make a little bit of a top feature to the pot here, just to give that a little bit of definition. And so we're going to do another rectangle, and we want this to let's see, I need to undo that. We want to select it. Let me select it and then I'll show you. We want this to kind of sit on top of the pot like that. So I want to make it just a little bit smaller, and then this shape will sit right like that. I like that size, so I'm going to go with that. And then if we wanted to, we could make that a little bit more rounded, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like a rectangle for now. So I'm going to put it about where I like it, and it keeps trying to lock it into the corner for me, and I don't like that. So I'm going to hold shift, and then that way it doesn't try to do it for me. It's going to let me do it. And so I'm going to hold shift and just set that on there about the right height that I want. Let's see, let me try that again, hold shift. But what I would like to do is, now that that is selected, also select the pot. Let's see. Okay, now they're both selected. I do at least want to center both of those. So I'm going to center on the vertical, and that lines that up perfectly. Both pieces are still selected, so I'm going to go to Path to Union. All right, and actually this is going to be the front and the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this piece. I thought I would just do the same thing, but since this is the front and the back and they'll be the same, I'm going to delete this one, and then what I will do is just copy this. So we'll Control C for copy and Control V as in Victor for paste. All right, and then there we have kind of the finished idea. So we've got our 4 layers. So again, we'll have a pot. We'll have a pot in the back, then the leaves, then the flower will be in front of the leaves, and then finally this front piece will be on front of the flower, and it'll be 4 layers deep, and then hopefully be able to stand. Now you can come back and add extra layers. Like we could have the lip of the pot, we could have that as a whole nother layer that we just glue to this. We could have some layers on each part of the petals on the flower. We could do something here in the center. We could come back and add some layers to our stem. So you get the idea. You can play around with this as much as you want, but I like the look of this. And so I am now going to come over and select my doodle, my original doodle, and I'm going to delete all of that. I'll tell you what, before I delete it, I'm going to go ahead and just save, just file to save. I'm going to call it Spring Flower. I like to save many versions sometimes. That way, save one with my little doodle, and then I'm going to delete it and save one without the doodle. So, all right. So now I can come back and delete my doodle. Several ways to do this. I think if I just select these pieces, we can get rid of it piece by piece. Or you could use the eraser tool to get rid of it, but this will work just fine. All right, and so now I'm left with this outline here. And we need to save this as an SVG, and that way almost every product out there you can import an SVG and then use it to cut on a Cricut or Silhouette or laser, Glowforge, you know, any type of device usually will take SVG, and then you guys could take this basic SVG and edit and make changes to it. So so this is what I want to save, and so I'm going to select everything and make sure everything is an object. I believe everything was already, but just to make sure. And then if we wanted to, we could even group each of these pieces together. I think I will go ahead and group. Let's see, there is an icon over here for it, but I'm going to go ahead and go to path to, or no, maybe it's object to group. And I kind of like to do that because then I can get an idea of the size of the final thing that's going to cut. Now, I did not take the time to position these. You can position these shapes to maximize your cutting. That way you use less material, have less waste. Like we could take this pot and flip it upside down and put it on top of this one, and that way we'd have everything contained. But just for this quick demo, we have all these shapes the way we want them, the way we want it to cut. And I like to get an idea of my sizing in here. And whenever we save it as an SVG, I need to change Inkscape to the workspace on Inkscape. And so this is currently set in millimeters. Now you can change this to whatever units you'd like. And it honestly, for our NAJ laser, I don't worry about the size here in Inkscape, because whenever I take this to my laser, I can make this whatever size I want. Now it is going to cut across like this, horizontal. So I'll need a large horizontal sheet of cardboard. And if you don't have that, you can break this apart into individual pieces that you laser cut. But I'm going to leave these as all 4 pieces. And then I notice here I'm about 800 by 428. So I'm going to go ahead and make this like my workspace, about 850 by 500. So let me go to File, to Document Properties, and we're going to make the width, make sure it's in millimeters. We're going to make the width of my workspace 850 and height 500. All right. And so then this square or this rectangle that's always on the workspace every single time you open Inkscape, that resizes that. And so now I should be able to get this image to fit within that shape, because that's my workspace and now my image fits. That's just a little quirky thing about Inkscape that's hard to get used to. All right, so now I have that just the way I want to save it as an SVG. So I'm going to go to File, to Save As, and I like to do it as a file of type. I like to do it as a plain SVG. That's what I've put on my website so far, and it seems to work. So plain SVG, and I'm going to just the Spring Flower 2. All right, and so this will be the first file that I'll share with you if you choose to cut this out. And then to be able to get a cut file for our lasers, I have been using the extension called Laser Engraver, but I will tell you this only works on an older version of Inkscape. And so I am currently running Inkscape 9.92. So there is a version that's 1 point something. They're probably up to something now, 1 point something, but that extension will not work in the new version of Inkscape. So you have to go back to an older version of Inkscape. And then we will be able to convert this to what they call an NC file. So like a CNC file. It's actually G code. And so that's way our laser just knows positions and where to cut, from one position to another, cut, put the laser on and go that distance and cut. And so it follows these paths. All right, so before we do that, we have to make sure we select everything and extension to Laser Engraver. And I just left all the defaults in here. It defaults to an output folder on your C drive. Of course, you can change this to whatever you want, but I just left it with the default. And then I leave the defaults for all the rest of this. But then on the first tab, this laser tab, very important, whatever you had in here before, make sure you change this. So I'm going to call this Spring Flower 2. Just to keep the naming convention. .nc will be the extension. This numeric suffix, if you created several of the same file, you would have to have that, but this is the first file that I've had named Spring Flower 2. The other Spring Flower 2 was an SVG, and so this is going to be the NC file that goes with it. Sometimes it seems to work better if you click Live Preview here. So I'm going to go ahead and check that and then click Apply. And I will warn you, this can take quite a while, and so sometimes you will think it's not doing anything. Like right now it says not responding, but if you just be patient and give it time, it should work. And so live preview, and I will click apply, or you may not have to click apply. Well, I'm going to go ahead and click apply anyway. And Inkscape never closes Windows, so we have to come in and close it. But before we close this, I'm going to double check my C drive to the output folder, because I want to make sure this output folder actually has my Springflower 2 in it. And so it is a 5K file, so it looks like something did in fact happen. And so that we should be good to go. All right, and so now I can come back and close this window. And then this live preview, it shows you a little printout here of the paths that the laser will follow to cut our shapes. And so we'll end up with 4 shapes cut out of cardboard. We'll be able to color them however we want, and then stack them together and glue them, and hopefully have a neat little design that we can set up on a shelf. So that's just a not so quick tutorial, but I hope you enjoyed that. And then later I am actually going to go to the laser in the garage and cut this out, and then I will finish the video out with some of those images, some of that video. But thanks so much, and we'll finish this in a minute. Okay, so I have brought my laptop out to the garage, and I have turned on my laser and have started my Windows version of the NAJ desktop software. And so I just want to show you what happens now. We have created in Inkscape, we have created a .nc file. So I'm going to show you in this Windows software. I come over here to the CNC menu, and then we're going to open up an NC file, and this will allow me to browse my computer. And we know that the Inkscape by default saves our NC file to the output folder on my C drive. So I'm going to go look at that, and then here is the file that we had previously created. So we're going to choose this file and click open. And it will come in roughly with the same dimensions as what we used in Inkscape. But again, like I said previously, usually I don't worry about the dimensions in Inkscape, because here is where I can reset it to whatever I would like. And so I'm going to be getting a piece of cardboard, that's roughly about 15 inches by 8 maybe. So I've got quite a bit of space to work with. Now again, in millimeters, 200 millimeters going across that, and you'll be able to see it physically here in just a minute with some extra screenshots of the laser itself. But you can kind of play around with this. Now again, that 225 millimeters across, that's the full 4 pieces. So roughly each piece would be what, about 50 millimeters across or so. And of course the height, we can get a really good idea of the height there with 120 millimeters. So again, you can adjust this whatever you'd like, and whenever you change one dimension, the other dimension will change accordingly to keep the perspective correct for you. So I'm going to just, well, let me just show you changing it. I'm going to go ahead and just set my size. I want to work based off of the height, and so I'm going to go in and change that to 100 millimeters. And then you'll notice it automatically has adjusted the width for us as well. And again, my piece of cardboard is plenty big enough to cover these dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and work with that. 1, 2, 3. So that's roughly about 4 inches tall for our design. So again, you can come back and do that, whatever settings you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it keeps some of these previous settings. I'm going to be doing this on cardboard. So with cardboard's a little bit tricky. I don't ever like to go over 50% power because it can catch fire fairly easily. And so I'm going to try doing it about 50 or so. And then for my burning time, maybe I'll just start with 20. Again, I do a little something different usually every time. So if this is not good, then we can certainly pause our laser and then reset it. And then with each pass, usually I will leave this just set to 1, and with each pass I can tweak it as needed. And so with that, this button will allow me to see the positioning on my cardboard, and I will do that in just 1 minute. And then once I like that positioning, then I will of course click this button to start this project. And as long as you don't move your cardboard, you can rerun this over and over until it cuts cleanly through. All right, excellent. Okay, and so our spring flower design has just completed its first pass in this sheet of cardboard, and there was 2 spots that did flare up just a bit. Again, if you have air assist, that will help control that. So that spot got a little bit of a flame, and then around the circle, just a little. So I am probably going to bump the burning time down to 10 milliseconds in the NAJ software. I'm still going to keep the power at 50%, but burning time down to 10%, and that will speed it up too. This first pass took about 5 minutes and 50 seconds. Just one thing about the design, if we make it this small, cutting on cardboard, that stem, it's going to be very tricky. That's probably too narrow, and again, our flower, it kind of loses some emphasis since that's going to be our main focal point. These little petals to the flower are probably going to be too skinny to look decent in cardboard. If you were cutting it in acrylic or plywood, probably wouldn't be so concerned, but in cardboard, those tiny cutouts can be problematic. So to get a nice clean cut whenever we layer this. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and continue, and then you'll see it whenever this is finished cutting out. Okay, it has just completed 4 passes, and my focus is much better dialed in today. I think the 4 passes may have done it, but I may run it just one more time just to make sure all these little pieces. I would much rather not have to use an X-Acto knife, so I'm going to run it one more time. Again, the other side of this cardboard had some shipping labels, so sometimes those spots are tricky. So I'm going to run it for a 5th time, and then I'll show you. Okay, it just finished that 5th pass, and I'm pleased. I managed to get some nice clean cuts on cardboard today. So again, my cardboard is raised slightly. I did use some human air assist by blowing on it during some of these intricate parts especially, but that way I could kind of peek up under it while it's running, and I knew that it was actually going through on the 4th pass. But again, I think this 5th pass has will allow it to just, most of these pieces are going to just push right out. So excellent. Excellent. This one might be the part where the sticker is, so I will have to work on that one a bit. But the rest of these look like they are going to work. Oh, wonderful. All right, and so we will take this and get the pieces painted, and I'll show you that layered effect. Okay, well, I'm excited. These are some of the cleanest cardboard cuts I've been able to get in a while. And they, your leftover cardboard, I think, is very pretty too. It could be its own piece of art. And this one did have some of that reinforced packing tape on here. That was the only tricky piece. That I did have to take an X-Acto knife just to those strings in that reinforced packing tape. But otherwise, it did great. And so this is, again, this is going to be the effect that we're looking for with our layers stacked on top of each other, just like that. And then once this is glued together, I'm going to try some of this tape runner that I found at Dollar Tree. I'll let you know how well that works. 2 for $1 in here. It probably, I don't know what the length is, but I'm going to try that. And then again, once this is taped, then it should hopefully sit up as well. I am going to go ahead and just color these off camera, and then I will be back. Alright, so I use my Posca pens. You can use whatever paint you have, and I am just thrilled with how this came out. Paint's still a little bit wet, but I did go ahead and glue it together, and the Dollar Tree tape runner actually worked really well. And I believe it is going to stand up just fine. So this, I just love it. This makes me happy.